Ladies and gentlemen, listen carefully. If everyone can interrupt your priorities, are they really your priorities? You may say your family is important. You may say your purpose is important. You may say your preparation, health, peace, and commitments are important. But importance is not proven by what you announce. It is proven by what you protect. A priority without protection is merely a preference. Look at your day. You begin with intention, but one message redirects you. One call rearranges you. One unexpected demand captures your attention, and suddenly your schedule belongs to everyone except you. You remain busy, but the work that matters is delayed. You remain responsive, but the people closest to you receive what is left. You remain available, but emotionally you are becoming empty. This is how purpose is displaced, not always by a great crisis, but by 1,000 small permissions. Now understand the issue. The issue is not that people lack value. Every person should be treated with dignity, but equal value does not mean equal access. Every request cannot possess equal authority over a life carrying unequal responsibilities. The person asking for 5 minutes may not know what those 5 minutes interrupt. They may not see the promise you are postponing, the preparation you are abandoning, or the relationship that keeps waiting for your full presence. You must see it. A boundary is not a declaration that someone is unimportant. A boundary is a decision that what has been entrusted to you will not be governed by whoever demands you most loudly. It protects your attention so you can give it deliberately. It protects your energy so you can serve without resentment. It protects your relationships so strangers do not continually receive what responsibility requires you to reserve. Stop confusing constant access with kindness. Start measuring access by stewardship. Guard what must grow. Protect what must be completed. Choose where your attention belongs before pressure chooses for you. We are going to build a practical system for doing exactly that, a system that replaces guilty availability with responsible leadership. Because unmanaged access is not merely inconvenient. It quietly determines what your life is permitted to produce. And every demand you accept without examination transfers control of your attention from the responsible person you to the most urgent voice. Now notice how the transfer happens. A request arrives, and because it arrives with intensity, you assume it carries authority. You stop what you are doing. You surrender your attention. You absorb another person's emotion. Then, when the interruption ends, you are expected to return immediately to your original responsibility as though nothing happened. But something did happen. Your concentration was broken. Your emotional direction was changed. Your momentum was interrupted. The request may have consumed 10 minutes, but its influence may follow you for the next hour. That is why interruption is not merely a matter of time. It is a matter of continuity. Not everything urgent is an emergency. Some urgency is genuine and deserves immediate action, but some urgency is poor planning demanding rescue. Some urgency is convenience demanding priority. Some urgency is anxiety demanding company. Some urgency is simply a loud presentation attached to a small consequence. Intensity does not create importance. Imagine a property with no gate, no entrance, and no process for deciding who may enter. Anyone can walk in, move things around, call the owner away from their work, and disturb everyone already inside. Would you call that property generous? No. You would call it unguarded. The absence of a gate does not produce hospitality. It produces disorder. This is what happens to a life without an access process. Important work keeps moving to tomorrow. Promises to those closest to you are repeatedly postponed. Preparation is squeezed into exhausted hours. Rest becomes something you hope to recover later. And eventually resentment appears not because you hate people, but because you keep giving people authority you never consciously decided to give them. So answer this honestly. Who is governing your day? Is it the person entrusted with its responsibilities, or is it whoever contacts you next? Is your schedule directed by purpose or captured by pressure? Reclaim the decision. Pause before responding. Examine the consequence. Remember what is already entrusted to you. Urgency may request your attention, but responsibility must decide whether it receives it. Yet many people know this and still cannot practice it. Why? Because beneath their constant availability lies a powerful belief. That loving people means always being reachable, and serving people means never saying no. That mistaken equation must be confronted. Here is the mistaken equation. If I love people, I must answer immediately. If I serve people, I must never disappoint them. If I say no, I have failed them. That equation is false. Love is not measured by how quickly you surrender your schedule. Service is not proven by your inability to refuse. Genuine love seeks what is good. Unlimited availability often gives people only what they prefer in the moment. Those are not always the same thing. You can respond immediately and still be careless. You can respond later and still be loving. You can accept a request while inwardly resenting it, or refuse it respectfully while protecting a promise already made. Which response contains greater integrity? Many people call it generosity when it is actually guilt. They give away time that already belongs to their family. They surrender energy required for work they promised to complete. They absorb emotional burdens when they possess no capacity to carry them responsibly. Then they congratulate themselves for saying yes while someone else quietly pays the price. You cannot give the same hour twice. Sometimes the honest answer is, I cannot do that now. Sometimes the responsible answer is to schedule the conversation. Sometimes service means directing the request to someone better positioned to help. A delayed answer, a delegated task, or a respectful refusal can carry more love than resentful compliance. And listen carefully. If you rescue people every time they feel pressure, they may never learn to plan. If you solve every problem they bring, they may never develop judgment. If you remove every consequence, they may never mature. Your constant availability may appear helpful while quietly teaching dependence. A boundary does not deny another person's worth. It determines the form, depth, and timing of your service. It says, you matter, but this request must be weighed against what has already been entrusted to me. So stop using guilt as your guide. Start using responsibility. Stop proving love through exhaustion. Start expressing love through honesty, order, and appropriate presence. Care can remain constant even when access must change. Once you understand that, boundaries are no longer acts of rejection. They become acts of stewardship, and stewardship is where personal leadership begins. Leadership begins before you lead an organization. It begins when you accept responsibility for your own life, for what must be protected, what must be developed, what must be completed, and what must be sustained. If you are responsible for it, you must create a boundary around it. Every meaningful commitment produces a corresponding limit. If you promise focused work, you must limit interruption. If you promise presence to your family, you must limit competing access. If you require private preparation, emotional stability, or physical recovery, you must protect the conditions that make them possible. A commitment without protection is only an intention. Now, do not confuse stewardship with selfishness. Selfishness abandons legitimate responsibility for personal comfort. Stewardship refuses competing demands in order to honor legitimate responsibility. One says, I do not care what I owe. The other says, I care so deeply that I will not allow distraction to destroy what I owe. Consider a cultivated field. The farmer prepares the soil, plants the seed, removes what threatens growth, and marks the territory. Is the fence an insult to everything outside it? No. The fence exists because something inside has been entrusted to the farmer's care. Guarding what must grow is not hostility toward what remains outside. Your focused work is a field. Your closest relationships are a field. Your peace, preparation, promises, and capacity are fields. If you leave every field unguarded, do not be surprised when nothing reaches maturity. Boundaries reveal priorities because they force you to decide which obligations possess real authority. Anyone can claim that something matters. Leadership appears when pressure arrives, and the claim must become a choice. So stop asking only who wants access to me. Ask, what responsibility will this access displace? Stop measuring a no by the disappointment it creates. Measure it by the commitment it protects. A well-placed no is not proof of indifference. It may be the clearest evidence that you understand what has been entrusted to you. A leader does not wait for pressure and then surrender. A leader establishes order before pressure arrives. But order requires structure. If every relationship receives the same access, then no responsibility is truly prioritized. We must now determine why different people require different kinds, depths, and speeds of access. Let us establish this clearly. Equal value does not require equal access. You can honor every person without giving every person the same proximity. You can respect everyone without granting everyone the same influence. You can treat people with dignity without making yourself immediately available to every request. Human worth may be universal, but access must be governed. Access should not be an emotional accident. It should be a design system. Some matters require an immediate response. Some conversations belong on a schedule. Some requests should be limited. Some responsibilities should be delegated. And some demands should receive no access at all. If you do not establish these pathways in advance, emotion will decide in the moment, and pressure will design your life for you. Think of access in levels. At the inner level are the people and responsibilities carrying your deepest mutual commitments. These are not merely the people who desire closeness. They are the relationships and duties in which accountability and consequence are greatest. Their access is deeper because your responsibility is deeper. Then there is a working level. This includes trusted collaborators and active responsibilities. Access here is purposeful, timely, and connected to a defined role. These people may need reliable communication, but they do not automatically require unrestricted entry into every part of your time or emotional world. Then there is a general level, acquaintances, audiences, optional requests, and relationships carrying little direct responsibility. They still deserve courtesy. They still deserve dignity. But their access should move through appropriate channels, available hours, and realistic expectations. Do not mistake these levels for rankings of human worth. They are arrangements of stewardship. A person may move closer or farther depending on trust, responsibility, season, and consequence. Access is not a trophy. It is a responsibility carried by both parties. Now examine your present pattern. Have you inverted it? Are strangers receiving immediate replies while your family receives postponed attention? Are optional requests consuming the energy required for essential work? Are casual relationships entering spaces that your closest commitments can barely reach? Correct the order. Give depth where trust supports it. Give priority where responsibility requires it. Adjust availability according to the season. Increase speed when the consequence justifies it. These four factors, trust, responsibility, season, and consequence, will keep you from improvising your boundaries whenever pressure appears. And we begin with trust, because closeness without proven trust does not merely threaten your schedule, it exposes your purpose and your emotional well-being. Trust determines depth. Do not grant deep access merely because someone is friendly. Friendliness is pleasant, but it is not proof of trustworthiness. Do not confuse familiarity with reliability. Do not confuse enthusiasm with character. A person may speak warmly, appear often, and express strong interest while remaining unprepared to handle what greater access requires. Trust is revealed through patterns. Can this person keep confidence? Do they communicate honestly? Do they respect a limit without punishing you for it? Do they use previous access responsibly? Are they consistent when there is no advantage to being consistent? Trust is not declared, it is demonstrated. And remember, access is not limited to your calendar. Emotional access is also access. When someone repeatedly unloads every crisis onto you, manipulates your sympathy, carries private matters into public conversation, or disregards your need to recover, they are consuming energy. That energy was meant to support your responsibilities, your relationships, and your preparation. You can lose a day without leaving your chair. This is why deep proximity given before trust is established creates confusion. You have granted the privileges of closeness without observing the conduct required to sustain closeness. Then, when disorder appears, you feel guilty for changing what wisdom should never have rushed. Let access develop progressively. Begin with appropriate limits. Observe behavior. Watch how the person handles a small confidence, a simple responsibility, a delayed response, and a clear no. When responsibility is demonstrated, access may expand. When responsibility is violated, access may need to contract. That contraction is not revenge. It is protection. You are not punishing a person because trust was damaged. You are adjusting access to reality so that what remains entrusted to you is not damaged further. Stop granting depth because of pressure. Stop granting influence because of chemistry. Stop granting permanent privileges because of history. Discern, observe, choose. Ask one governing question. Has this person's conduct demonstrated that greater access will strengthen responsibility rather than increase disorder? Trust tells you who can safely come closer, but even a trustworthy person does not automatically possess a claim on every hour. Trust governs depth. Responsibility governs priority. We must now determine which needs are truly yours to carry. Now we come to responsibility, because seeing a need does not automatically make that need your assignment. You may care deeply and still not be the person responsible for solving it. Compassion allows you to recognize another person's burden. Responsibility determines whether you must carry it. If you confuse the two, every visible problem will become a command, and every emotional appeal will compete with obligations already entrusted to you. Begin with what you have already accepted. What promises have you made? What roles have you willingly assumed? Which people depend directly upon your care? What maintenance does your own life require if you are to remain capable of serving? What work is connected to your purpose and must be developed even when nobody is demanding it? These responsibilities possess legitimate claims. Voluntary assistance is valuable, but optional help must not repeatedly sabotage non-optional commitments. You cannot keep rescuing acquaintances while disappointing your family. You cannot keep accepting spontaneous requests while neglecting work you promised to finish. You cannot keep donating the energy required to sustain your own health and then call the collapse generosity. Every yes contains a hidden no. So when a request arrives, ask the displacement question. If I say yes to this, who or what receives the no? Which person waits? Which task is delayed? Which promise is weakened? Which necessary period of preparation disappears? The loudest demand often defeats the quietest responsibility because important commitments do not always shout. Your purpose may wait silently. Your family may stop asking. Your health may decline gradually. Your unfinished work may remain patient. But silence does not mean absence. And delayed consequences are still consequences. Make these decisions before pressure comes. Name your non-negotiable commitments. Reserve time for them. Protect the hours required for focused work, direct care, recovery, and preparation. When optional requests arrive, measure them against an order already established. Stop allowing emotion to manufacture obligations. Start distinguishing what is compassionate from what is compulsory. Help where you can, but do not abandon what is yours in order to carry what is merely near. Access should follow responsibility, not emotional pressure. Yet responsibility alone does not settle every decision. Responsibilities endure, but capacity changes. A wise boundary must recognize the season, because what you could carry yesterday may not be what you are assigned or able to carry today. Capacity is not permanent. It changes with the season. There are seasons when you are building and require long periods of concentration. Seasons when you are healing and must protect your strength. Seasons of caregiving, transition, preparation, or unusually intense responsibility. Each season makes a different demand, and therefore each season requires a different pattern of access. What was appropriate before may be irresponsible now. Yesterday, you may have had room for frequent meetings, immediate replies, long conversations, and spontaneous commitments. Today, your responsibilities may have changed. Yet many people continue offering yesterday's availability because they fear that adjustment will look like rejection. Listen carefully. Not now does not always mean not ever. A seasonal limit is not necessarily a permanent separation. It may simply mean that the present assignment requires concentration. The danger is that you may preserve outdated access out of nostalgia. You remember how things used to be. Or you preserve it out of habit because people expect the same response. Or fear keeps you trapped. You do not want to disappoint anyone. Sometimes you are protecting an old identity. The person who always answers, always attends, always carries, always comes. But faithfulness to an old identity can become unfaithfulness to a present responsibility. Review your access regularly. Which meetings still serve a legitimate purpose? Which communication channels invite unnecessary interruption? Which social commitments belong to a season that has ended? Which forms of emotional labor can you no longer carry responsibly? Which response expectations must now be revised? When access must change, communicate clearly. State what is changing. Be honest about your capacity. Offer a realistic alternative when one exists. And be cautious about making promises simply to relieve the discomfort of the moment. Do not disappear from every meaningful relationship. Concentrate. Do not become cruel. Become clear. Do not treat reduced capacity as a personal failure. Treat it as information that must guide responsible choices. You are permitted to revise access when your season changes. That is not betrayal. That is stewardship in motion. Season tells you when access must change. But another question remains. Which interruption deserves speed? To answer that, you must look beyond intensity and examine consequence, because some matters require immediate action, while others can safely wait, move to another person, or disappear from your schedule altogether. Now we must separate emotional intensity from actual consequence. A request may arrive with alarm, insistence, and dramatic language, yet produce little harm if it waits. Another request may arrive quietly, without pressure, while carrying consequences that demand immediate attention. Volume is not a measure of importance. Learn to place requests on a ladder of consequence. At the top are matters involving immediate harm or irreversible loss. These deserve urgent attention. Below them are significant matters whose impact is serious but recoverable. Then come ordinary delays, issues that should be handled, but not necessarily now. Below these are inconveniences. And at the bottom are preferences. Someone would like an answer, a favor, or your presence immediately, but nothing meaningful is endangered by waiting. This distinction matters because high consequence responsibility may require fast access even from someone outside your closest circle. At the same time, a familiar person may expect an immediate response only because you have trained them to expect one. Familiarity does not turn preference into emergency. When pressure arrives, ask 4 questions. What happens if I respond now? What happens if I wait? Who will bear the consequence? And which protected commitment will be interrupted if I act? These questions restore judgment. Suppose a work request affects a promise already made. Responsibility and consequence may require prompt action. Suppose your family needs your presence during a moment carrying real emotional weight. That consequence may outrank a routine message. Suppose a friend wants an immediate conversation about something that can safely wait. Care for them, but schedule it. Suppose someone brings you an important problem that another capable person can address. Delegate it. Delegation is not abandonment. When the consequence matters but your personal involvement is unnecessary, directing the matter wisely protects both the need and your responsibility. Now the complete filter is clear. Trust governs depth. Responsibility governs priority. Season governs capacity. Consequence governs speed. Use all 4. Do not give deep access without trust. Do not assign priority without responsibility. Do not promise capacity your season cannot support. Do not confuse intensity with consequence. This is how you move from reflex to leadership. You can now decide deliberately who comes closer, what receives priority, how much you can carry, and how quickly you must respond. But an internal decision cannot govern relationships until it becomes an external expectation. Your framework must now be communicated clearly and enforced consistently. A boundary that exists only in your mind cannot guide anyone else. People cannot respect an expectation they have never been given. You must communicate. Tell people when you are available. Tell them which matters require which channel. Tell them when you protect focus work, personal recovery, or family presence. Tell them what kind of response time is realistic. Clarity before pressure prevents confusion during pressure. Use a simple pattern. Affirm the relationship. State the limit. Name the responsibility being protected. Then offer the next realistic option when one exists. You might say, I value this conversation, but I cannot give it proper attention now because I have already committed this time. Let us schedule it. That is not rejection. That is ordered respect. You are honoring the person enough to avoid giving them distracted presence and honoring your responsibility enough not to abandon it. But do not turn every boundary into a courtroom defense. Explanation informs. Endless justification invites negotiation. When you give 10 reasons for a limit, some people will treat each reason as an obstacle to remove. Be respectful. Be brief. Be clear. Then build structures that carry the decision. Schedule important conversations. Establish communication windows. Protect periods of focused work. Delegate requests that do not require you. Reserve personal time before the calendar becomes crowded. A boundary supported only by willpower will be tested repeatedly. A boundary supported by structure becomes easier to honor. And you must enforce what you communicate. If you announce a limit but abandon it whenever someone persists, you teach people that your first answer is not real. You teach them that pressure is the price of access. Consistency is kindness. Without consistency, you overcommit, become resentful, withdraw, and later apologize. Then the cycle begins again. Calm consistency prevents that disorder. Some people will understand. Some will feel disappointed. Some will test you. Some may become angry. Their reaction provides information, but it does not alone determine whether your boundary is right. Be firm without contempt. Be direct without superiority. Protect your responsibilities without demeaning the person making the request. Clear boundaries preserve dignity because they replace guessing with honesty. They allow you to serve intentionally, keep your promises, and remain present where responsibility has placed you. Yet even after you communicate well, another battle remains. The greatest pressure may not come from the person outside the boundary. It may come from the guilt, fear, and old identity inside you, the forces that tempt you to reopen every gate you just established. When you establish a new boundary, do not expect immediate comfort. Silence may feel like rejection. A delayed reply may feel cruel. Another person's disappointment may feel like proof that you have done something wrong. But discomfort is not always guilt. True guilt points to a value you have violated. Discomfort may simply mean you have changed a habit, interrupted an expectation, or refused a role that was never healthy. You must learn the difference. Otherwise, every uncomfortable feeling will become an instruction to surrender. Ask yourself, do I need to be indispensable? Do I fear that if I am not always available, I will be excluded? Have I confused being useful with being worthy? Do I rescue people quickly because I care, or because their approval makes me feel secure? These questions expose the identity beneath the habit. Some people do not merely enjoy being needed, they depend on it. Their availability becomes a way of proving their value. But when worth depends on usefulness, every request becomes a test, every no feels dangerous, and exhaustion becomes inevitable. Then resentment appears. Resentment often reveals that your mouth has repeatedly said yes, while your conscience knew the responsible answer was no. You blame people for taking what you kept offering without discernment. Change the pattern. Place a pause between the request and the response. During that pause, examine trust. Examine responsibility. Examine your season. Examine the consequence. Do not let another person's urgency eliminate your judgment. And if you fail, if you abandon the limit, overcommit again, or surrender under pressure, do not build a house inside condemnation. Acknowledge the lapse. Restore the boundary quickly. Identify what defeated you. Was it fear? Flattery? Guilt? Habit? Learn from the pressure. Strengthen the structure. And continue. Temporary misunderstanding may be the price of long-term integrity. Some people need time to adjust to a version of you that no longer provides unlimited access. Let them adjust. You can be kind without being controlled. You can be responsive without being reactive. You can be generous without abandoning your purpose. You can disappoint an expectation without betraying a relationship. Now conviction must become action. The framework is clear and the resistance has been exposed. It is time to reset your calendar, reorder your relationships, and rebuild your habits around what you are truly responsible to protect. Now bring the entire matter under examination. Human worth does not require identical access. Urgency does not determine authority. Love does not demand permanent availability. A boundary is not a verdict against people. It is a decision to protect what has been entrusted to you. Audit your life. Examine your time. Who controls it? Examine your attention. What repeatedly fragments it? Examine your emotional energy, who receives it, and what remains for your legitimate responsibilities. Examine your communication habits, your existing commitments, and the close relationships that may have been surviving on leftovers. Then identify 3 patterns. Which access must deepen because responsibility has been neglected? Which access must become scheduled because it matters but should not remain unrestricted? Which access must be reduced or removed because it repeatedly produces disorder? Use the 4 questions. Where has trust been proven? What responsibility is truly yours? What does this season require? Which consequence genuinely demands speed? Do not postpone the correction. Stop rewarding every interruption and start protecting focused work. Stop apologizing for legitimate responsibility and start communicating it clearly. Stop giving your core commitments what remains and start placing them first. Stop allowing noise to outrank purpose. Stop allowing guilt to overrule wisdom. Stop allowing another person's pressure to become your government. Today, define protected hours. Communicate 1 boundary you have delayed. Repair 1 responsibility your availability has neglected. Decide when you will review the new system and adjust it with honesty. Guard without hostility. Choose without guilt. Serve without erasing yourself. Be generous without becoming governed by demand. Remain available to purpose before you become available to pressure. When you order access, you will become more present, not less loving. Your service will become cleaner because it is chosen rather than resented. Your relationships will become more honest because expectations are clear. Your work will become stronger because preparation is protected. And what has been entrusted to you will finally receive the attention required to mature. Your life was not given to be controlled by whoever shouts next. It was given to carry responsibility, develop purpose, and produce meaningful contribution. Protect it, refine it, govern it. When access is directed by purpose, availability becomes a deliberate gift, not a life surrendered to demand.